funny too when your eyes look into mine. Creeper, creep.
I have a long story with Jeepers Creepers. I discovered it very young, barely 11 years old. At the time I had already seen Jaws or even Alien, but this film, it was different. I wouldn't know exactly why. Maybe the sense of realism, maybe the atmosphere, or simply the twist. I hadn't seen the trailer, and to me, the creeper was a man. So when I understood that it was something else, a demonic creature, it scared the shit out of me. All of that managed to traumatize the 11 years old kid that I was. I've always coped with scary movies more or less the same way. I would help myself by watching the making of, the behind the scenes, over and over again. That was my way of reassuring myself. Over time, I didn't just know the actors or the directors' names, I could name a big part of the crew. Bennett Selvey, the composer, Brett Parker, who designed the creeper, and most importantly, Brian Penikas, the artist who brought it to life. His segments in the making of, where he shows the makeup, the creation process, those were my favorite moments. Because behind the monster, there was a man, Jonathan Breck, and it was Brian's talent that turned him into a nightmare. Late 2023, while scrolling on Facebook, I came across Brian Penikas' profile. It was part of a group I'm also in. I had a story with Brian a few years ago when my brother bought a mask from him. I sent him a message to thank him once again for allowing us to discover his work in real life. I knew he had a YouTube channel back in the day with the Ape Maniac creations. Is it still online? Yep. What is this creeper video? Wow! Brian restored prosthetics made for the film production and turned them into an open-head display. It's gorgeous! An idea? No, that would be impossible. I contact Brian again 2 days after my message. I was wondering if pulling some prosthetics from your movie molds and having them to the same kind of Jonathan Breck life cast shown in the video could be done. Brian replied right away, with just a few words and a photo. You mean something like this? I wasn't the only one who had the idea, and Brian and his team were already working on a bust. I was thrilled by the idea of adding Brian's work to my collection again. Several months went by, and in May 2024, I sent my deposit to Brian. From that moment, patience would be key. And even though it was sometimes hard to wait, Brian kept replying to my messages asking for updates. The original bust commissioned by another collector appeared online. It was absolutely insane. Saying it was the best creeper bust ever made would be pointless. After all, it's the original creator using his original molds on a life cast of Jonathan Breck. Of course this bust crushes the competition. For my copy, I chose a nude version, and Brian had the crazy idea to have the folded wings on the back. Even though the creeper's look is one of my favorites, and the ambiguity of whether he is or isn't a man is one of the things I love the most about the character, I wanted to admire the sculpting work of Brian and his team in its entirety. On March 25th of this year, I received the photos of my finished bust. It was more beautiful than anything I could have imagined, and I won't show them to you to avoid spoiling the reveal. 2 weeks later, the delivery man knocked at my door, and on a large package, I recognized a very familiar face. It was one of the craziest unboxings of my life as a collector. Finally, after all these years, the creeper was terrifying me again. After 23 years, the creeper was back. You'll all agree with me when I say that every single detail on this bust is absolutely breathtaking. The antenna-like appendages, the wrinkles, the hairs, the density of his hair, the skulls on the torso, right down to the nipple. Everything is 100% accurate. It's incredible to be able to observe the creeper this close with your own eyes. I'm sure some of you will discover that the creeper has a beard, a detail I personally didn't notice back when I first discovered the film, but only years later. Brian also hated the famous red marks to the face. I've always wondered what they were. Is the creeper a makeup fan? Either way, it adds depth to the makeup, and it's exactly this kind of details that makes me love this creator so much. There are so many things left open to interpretation, and you can imagine a million different stories just by looking at the beast. The life in the creator's eyes felt more real than nature itself. The work done by Brian and his team goes beyond anything I could have imagined. As a gift, I received this beautiful plaque signed by Jonathan Breck, the creeper himself, Victor Salva, the director, and Brian, the very people who had traumatized me years earlier. This was a long project with Brian, and I have to admit I feel a bit nostalgic now that the bust is at home. I truly felt like I went back in time with this project, writing to Brian again about the creeper, about adding something to my collection. It brought back amazing memories, and the result is more than perfect. You will find Brian and his team's email address in the description. Do not hesitate to contact them if you also wish to add your own creeper to your collection. It is definitely a centerpiece in my collection, and I highly encourage my fellow horror fans to reach out. You won't be disappointed. Well, the creeper is back, and he's here to stay. Yes, it took time. Yes, it wasn't cheap, but my god, this bust is worth every penny and every minute spent on this project. I would like to thank Brian, the way the 11-year-old Loris would have, discovering the artist in the behind the scenes, reassuring him about the reality of the creature. Today, it's the 30-year-old Loris thanking Brian for bringing me back to my childhood and teenage years with this masterpiece in my collection. It's a piece I will cherish for the next 23 years before the creeper comes back to feed.